In June of 2024, a claim spread across social media that a secret 50-year treaty between the United States and Saudi Arabia, one that supposedly forced Saudi oil to be sold exclusively in US dollars, had just quietly expired, and that the foundation of the entire global financial system was about to crack. Searches for the word petrodollar hit their highest level ever recorded. Commentators warned this was the beginning of the end for the dollar. But there is just one problem. According to the actual historical record, that specific 50-year treaty never existed at all. Here's why this matters beyond one viral rumor. The idea that oil is priced in dollars really has helped make the dollar the default currency of global trade for half a century. That part is genuinely true and genuinely important. Roughly 80% of global oil transactions are still conducted in dollars today. But why that happened and how solid the arrangement behind it actually is turns out to be a far messier, more interesting story than one secret contract with an expiration date. This is the real history of how the dollar got tied to oil and why the myth version of the story keeps outperforming the true one. To understand what happened in the 1970s, you have to remember what had just happened right before it. In August of 1971, President Nixon severed the dollar's last formal tie to gold, ending the Bretton Woods system that had anchored major world currencies for nearly 3 decades. The dollar was now what's called a fiat currency, valuable because of the trust and the government backing, not because it could be redeemed for a fixed amount of metal. That left an open question hanging over the entire global economy. If the dollar wasn't backed by gold anymore, what was going to keep the rest of the world demanding it in such enormous quantities? The answer arrived unexpectedly through a crisis. In October of 1973, several Arab oil-producing nations imposed an embargo in response to Western support for Israel during that year's war, sharply cutting oil production and sending prices skyrocketing. Within months, oil-producing nations, Saudi Arabia foremost among them, found themselves accumulating an almost unimaginable surplus of dollars from oil sales, far more than their own economies could immediately absorb or spend. That mountain of cash created a new, urgent question for both countries. Saudi Arabia needed somewhere productive to put an enormous windfall. The United States, meanwhile, needed to make sure all the dollars flowing out to pay for oil didn't simply pile up overseas. It wanted at least some of that money flowing back into the American financial system. Here's where the real publicly documented history begins. On June 8, 1974, the United States and Saudi Arabia signed a formal, entirely public agreement establishing the U.S.-Saudi Joint Commission on Economic Cooperation. It covered a broad range of economic, technical, and industrial cooperation between the two countries, infrastructure, trade, technology sharing. It was covered by the press at the time. There was nothing hidden about it. What this public agreement did not contain, based on the historical and diplomatic record, was any clause requiring Saudi Arabia to price its oil exclusively in US dollars. In fact, Saudi Arabia kept accepting British pounds as a payment for oil sales for a period even after this agreement was signed, only phasing that out later in 1974 for separate, practical reasons. There was a second arrangement reached later in 1974 that genuinely was kept out of public view, and this is the part frequently blended together with the public agreement to create the popular, quote-unquote, secret treaty myth. In this quieter arrangement, the United States reportedly committed to provide military equipment and support to Saudi Arabia, and in exchange, Saudi Arabia agreed to reinvest a significant share of its oil revenue into U.S. Treasury securities, effectively recycling petrodollars straight back into the American financial system. This part really was confidential for decades. It only became publicly documented in 2016 after Bloomberg News successfully obtained records through a Freedom of Information Act request to the U.S. National Archives. But notice what this actual secret agreement was about: recycling existing dollar revenue into U.S. investments, not legally mandating that oil be priced in dollars in the first place. Those are two very different things, and the popular myth quietly merges them into one. If there was no single contract forcing it, how did the dollar end up as the overwhelming default currency for pricing oil worldwide? The honest answer is less dramatic than a secret treaty, but arguably more revealing. It happened gradually, through practical convenience reinforcing itself over time. The dollar was already the world's dominant currency reserve coming out of the Bretton Woods era. Oil is a globally traded commodity, and having every barrel priced in one common, widely accepted currency made trading, comparing prices, and settling transactions dramatically simpler for everyone involved, buyers and sellers alike. Once a critical mass of the oil market settled into pricing in dollars, switching to a different currency became more complicated and less liquid for any single country to attempt alone, which reinforced the existing pattern further. Saudi Arabia's lifeline and influence within the OPEC helped extend that dollar pricing convention across most of the cartel, but through influence and practical alignment, not through the terms of one binding legal document controlling the entire system. Here's the detail that makes the 2024 panic so instructive. When outlets and independent economists actually investigated the viral claim, they found no primary source, no treaty document, no signing date, no institutional record for a single 50-year agreement mandating exclusive dollar oil pricing with a fixed 2024 expiration. Economists, including a chief economist at a major global bank, publicly described the viral version of the story as fabricated, even while acknowledging that real historical agreements from 1974 absolutely did exist and did matter. The myth persisted anyway, for a reason that should sound familiar if you've watched this channel before. A single, dramatic secret contract with a clean 50-year countdown is a much more satisfying story than a web of overlapping public agreements, one genuinely confidential treasury recycled arrangement, and several decades of gradually reinforcing market convenience story implies. The tidy version spreads faster than the true one, even when the true version is arguably more impressive, an entire global financial arrangement holding together for 50 years without ever needing a single binding contract to enforce it. The plain English lesson here connects directly to something worth remembering about money in general. Systems that look like they're held together by one single official rule are very often actually held together by something messier. Accumulated habit, mutual convenience, and decades of institutions quietly reinforcing each other's trust in the arrangement. That doesn't make the dollar's role in the oil markets fragile. If anything, a system with no single point of failure, no one contract that could simply expire, has proven considerably more durable than the viral version of the story gave it credit for. But it does mean the real explanation for why something as big as global oil pricing works the way it does is almost never as simple as one secret piece of paper. If this video made you curious about how global finance actually holds together behind the scenes, it's worth taking a similarly close look at how your own money is actually working day to day. If you're looking for a clear, no surprises way to manage your own savings, check out the links below and check it out for yourself. As always, not financial advice, just financial history. We'll see you next time.